So I got lost. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere and it's for a good reason. I needed to test a ute that is properly built for off-roading. It's not just a trim package, it has proper mechanical upgrades to make sure that I can get out of a place like this without any sweat. So what's that ute? Well, it's this beast of a thing, which is the 2022 Nissan Navara PRO-4X WARRIOR. It is a Japanese brand, a Thai-built truck that's imported to Australia, upgraded by an Australian company wearing American tires. And I have two questions to answer. One, is this worth buying at the top of the range with all of its aftermarket parts? And then second of all, should you actually buy one of these? So in this review, I'll walk you around the outside features and what's been upgraded on the interior as well. And since I'm taking this thing on a bit of an adventure, I'm gonna let you know what it's like on back roads like this and taking it off-road, and more importantly, what it's like on extended long road trips. I've already driven 500 kilometers just to get to this point. I've got another 500 kilometers of driving to go. You're joining me. This is Product Review Cars. My name's Cameron. Let's get into it. And of course, before I get this review started, please make sure you're subscribed because it's the best way to show your support for this channel. So if you're seeing this video and you aren't subscribed and you want to see more reviews and encourage us to do more dumb stuff like get lost in the middle of nowhere, make sure you're subscribed and leave a comment. I'll reply to you down there if you have any questions. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's talk pricing. You can get this in two different transmission options, and those are the main differences between the prices you're gonna pay. You've got a manual and you've got an auto. This is the auto, so it starts at just below $70,000 before on-road costs. And to be honest, that's not a terrible deal for what you're getting. We'll get into all those bits and pieces of what you're getting a little bit later. But if you want more power, you're gonna spend a little bit more and get the Amarok W580. And if you want something a bit more American, you can go for the Gladiator, which is made by Jeep, same sort of price, and then there's some other options around that price point. So it's not more expensive than its competitors, actually towards the lower end for being a top spec ute, which is pretty good. However, if you're not doing this off-roading all the time, you might be spending a little bit extra cash on upgrades that you're not necessarily going to take advantage of. So make sure you know what you're getting into before you buy one of these. So I've already done a full review on the new Nissan Navara, so I'm not going to walk through all the nitty-gritty details of the new Navara. I'm just going to talk about the upgrades this specific car gets. If you want to watch that review that I did on the Navara, you can see that as a link floating above my head or a link down in the description. So what is this car? Well, it's the Nissan PRO-4X version of the Navara, which comes straight from Thailand, but then it arrives here in Australia and it goes straight to Melbourne. So this one goes to Melbourne and gets upgraded by Premcar, formerly known as FPV. And those guys are serious about making proper mechanical upgrades. So you can see that is quite obvious here. We have a 40mm lift and we have the track width of the car widened by 30mm. So it's taller and it's a bit wider as well. So that's quite cool. We also have this hoopless bull bar here, which I think looks fantastic and integrates very nicely into the overall car design. And we also have some black cladding on the front of it and also this black grille with some black badging and red lettering on the Nissan badge, which looks, menacing and contrasts great with this white paint, which I wasn't really a fan of to start with, but this white paint is growing on me. We also have some cool lights as well. We have the headlamps, which are the same ones that you get on the Nissan Navara. They look quite good with some good LED daytime running lights. And you've also got some fog lamps built into the bull bar, and you do have a massive light bar running below this grille here. It's nice and bright and you can toggle that on and off on the inside of the car, but it only goes on when you put the high beams on, so you can't just toggle that little switch if you want to flash someone, but the high beams become very bright when you use these in conjunction with these headlights. And then underneath the car we do get a Nissan Navara branded bash plate, which means anything that hits that shouldn't go through and damage the engine, which looks great and it's actually quite practical. And so what's changed along the side? We do get Cooper off-road tires, which are 275s, both front and rear. We've also got this nice side step along the side to get into this car because it's been lifted a tiny bit. We have some cool decals, twin turbo. Yes, let everyone know that you got not one, but you have twin turbos underneath the bonnet, some mountain decals towards the back of the sticker. We have some aggressive wheel flares as well because the actual widened width exceeds the normal body of the Nissan Navara. So legally you have to have these, but they also do look quite cool, especially when they come from factory. And then we have the Nissan PRO-4X logo and then the WARRIOR Warrior logo underneath it. So no one's gonna mistake this for a regular Pro 4X. And so you have a sports bar along the back as well, which looks quite good and also can become very practical when you have to tie things to it. And so overall, the side profile of this truck is my favorite part of this design. It just looks nice and boxy, and it really does look like a proper mean off-roader. And then unfortunately, it's not as exciting as it is around the front as it is at the back. There's only two things here that are worth noting. One's the black badge, and two is this tow hitch receiver. It's specially designed by Premcar to make sure that this lift doesn't affect how you hitch trailers. So that is a cool bit of engineering that they're actually quite proud of, and I give them kudos to it because it makes living with this truck just a little bit easier. Now, not a whole bunch has changed to the back of this ute, which makes it a ute compared to when we reviewed it last. So what you have back here is a tub liner, and you've also got some little hooks that you can move around to tie things down. So some nicely designed tie downs, which have everyone looking at them and wondering what they are, because they're pretty cool to look at just normally. A little Navara badge back here, but that's about it. The gross vehicle mass of this car has been increased by 100 kilos because of the extra weight added to this car, and Premcar was definite on not compromising the carrying capacity of this car. So the actual payload capacity back here is still just under 1 ton, which is pretty good for a car that doesn't have leaf springs. Now, the Nissan Navara's interior isn't a bad interior by any means. It isn't as flash as some other utes or incoming utes like the new Ford Ranger, but it does the job very nicely. Hopping in here is nice and easy thanks to these side steps, and we're greeted with, a few different elements that are familiar from the Navara we've already reviewed. We have a giant touchscreen in the middle, which is great for Apple CarPlay connectivity, which I've got all hooked up just here through one of the USB ports. There's a 7-inch display between the analog dials in front of me. But then what's specific to this interior is we have like a little red Nissan logo with some red lettering in the middle of it. And then we've also got some leather seats with Pro 4X on them. And then Premcar adds these Warrior branded headrests on the front seats, which look quite good. And they are nicely embroidered and they're quite high quality as well. So this really does lift the cabin interior. But then don't go touching much of the other stuff because there's lots of scratchy plastics in here. So it feels like a very practical ute despite having some nice leather seats. So I guess what you've got in here is a nice mix of a normal Navara and then just the added touch of the Warrior seats in this car. That's about it on the interior, what's changed for this particular car. What I do complain about though, these blank switches just in front of the cup holders. It's just sort of like I bought the top of the range ute. Why do I have some blank switches? I'm also not a fan of the gloss black and chrome around the shifter. It's just a little bit too prone to showing dust and fingerprints and scratches. But apart from that, this interior does the job just nicely, but I'm pretty sure people are hungry for a bit of an update for this center console area. Okay, so you know the features, you know the price, but you need to know what this thing is like to drive and what features stand out and what features are a little bit annoying or what lack of features there may be. So I'm gonna take you on a bit of an off-road stretch right now to join me to get on some paved roads. We're gonna drive down to the Kosciuszko National Park, and I wanna see what makes this car great and maybe some things that are gonna be a little bit annoying with it. And then answer the ultimate question for you, if you should buy one of these. And I'm gonna put it on a scale of, should you buy it, should you consider it, or should you leave it? So let's get out of here. All right, so starting off with this off-road section, I thought it'd be appropriate to try and get as lost as possible. So where I am right now is a bunch of difficult roads that you need a proper four-wheel drive to get through just to get to where I am right now. And this car was more than up for the task. What we have in here that's gonna help us is that we have hill descent control, we have a rear diff locker, and we obviously have our four-wheel drive controls. On top of that, there are some drive modes. So when the normal drive modes we have is sport, standard, and tow. But when you go into 4x4 mode, which you have to turn this little toggle down underneath the climate controls to 4 high, then you get an extra mode called off-road mode, which is just basically gonna prep the computers to say, look, we're off-road, so please just control any slippage accordingly. And so what I've noticed so far is just how composed this car is traveling off-road. I'm gonna start with a hill descent control test as well. So on a nice bit of steep, bit of loose surface right here, and there's a bit of a dip before we go down. So I'm gonna go ahead and engage hill descent control now, that's on, and away we go. Okay. The sounds it makes is pretty interesting, but it works, and quite well. Nice. So we can turn that off when we get down to the bottom of this hill. Excellent. And there's a bit of a puddle here we can sort of go exploring through. Very nice. Oh, and let's start heading back to some paved roads, because that's really where we need to be heading for now. So getting out of here, putting torque down, it's nice and evenly distributed through the four wheels. Now, what I love about this car are the tires. The Cooper tires do a fantastic job of gripping to the road, putting power down, and providing enough comfort driving through bits of off-road sections just like this. They only require 30 PSI per tire, which feels quite low, but as someone who doesn't really use off-road tires all that often, it makes a lot of sense when you're out on the road, because obviously they're soft enough for comfort around the roads, and then when you're out here, they also don't send a whole bunch of shocks back through to your car because they're not super inflated either. So they're a very good tire option. I'm very glad they come as standard on this trim. Driving through these roads here, the car is very comfortable, and that's also thanks to that suspension tune that Premcar's done on this car. So that's part of the reason why you're buying this, is because the suspension has been revised to make it a bit more responsive on the road, and then it's gonna send less aggressive shocks through the car if you hit a bump just too hard, or you're going through some very mogul-y type terrains. They're not gonna be all sent through your spine like they would on maybe a more stiffly sprung car. So the suspension tune is one of the biggest things that this car receives, and it's something they actually worked on for the 2022 model, even though they did it for the 2021 model. So it's pretty cool to see that they've kept on working on it. And I can say right now, off-road, it's a very comfortable tune. When you go a bit faster though, you can feel this car just feel a little bit stiff. It's not the worst feeling in the world, but it's not like something like a Baja suspension where you're gonna, not feel a single bump. It still gives you enough feedback here and there, but it's not gonna be something that's gonna iron out every single bump. Now, I love where I am right now. This is a pretty beautiful scenery that we're driving through, and this car just feels like it's one with the roads that it drives on. It's purpose-built from factory, and it certainly feels that way off-road. The four-wheel drive system is just as capable as it was in the normal Navara, and I feel very comfortable just driving this car. The power distribution from this motor is also very smooth. It's very buttery in terms of how it delivers its torque, and that twin turbo setup, which is a staged setup, so one spins early in the RPMs and then another one spins later. It is a very good motor. I like this motor quite a lot. It puts out 140 kilowatts and 450 newton meters of torque. Premcar did talk about doing a power upgrade, but they said they wanted to keep the price below, a certain point, so they couldn't really offer a more aggressive engine tune, which is understandable, but it sort of makes me wish that they did, or at least offered an aggressively tuned model, because I think that would be kind of cool if you had a bit more power in this thing. I'll explain later when we're out on the highway why you might need that. But then off-road, you don't need any more power than this for the roads you're going to be approaching. Now, engaging 4 low, you go into neutral. We're going to go push into 4 low. We're engaged. Let's go to drive, and away we go. So the camera feed on this car is a little bit annoying because you can't keep it on all the time. You can go into the cameras when you're going low speed. So it's got a 360-degree top-down camera, and you also got a front-facing camera. Very, very useful for off-roading compared to something like you get in the D-Max, which doesn't have a front-facing or 360-degree camera. Although Nissan, I just wish we got a bit of a resolution update because it's a little bit on the low resolution side. Now we're going up this steeper rock face here, and it's something I would be nervous going up in any other car, but the Navara PRO-4X WARRIOR, no problems whatsoever, especially in 4 low. Oh, it just soaks up bumps. This suspension tune is a chef's kiss for a dual cab ute. We got rid of the leaf springs out back. We have a 5-link suspension setup, which some people on Instagram seem to think that the leaf springs were just fine, but I can tell you now that the 5-link setup for off-roading like this is exactly what you want compared to a set of leaf springs. It feels a lot more independent, feels like things are happening at the rear rather than all happening all at once. It just feels like a better overall tune, and I like it quite a lot. So, This car is a beast off-road, and it's something that is worth every dollar in the upgrade if you're planning to jump from the Pro 4X into a seriously built off-roader like this. But how does it handle on the open road? Okay, we're starting on the on-road section with a quick 0 to 100 run. Let's see how fast this truck is in 3, 2, 1. That was about a 10-second run to 100 kilometers an hour. Actually, 13.4 seconds to 100. So it's not overly quick in this car, despite it packing a twin turbocharged 4-cylinder diesel. It's just because this car weighs so much, and then also that 4-cylinder does need a tune if you want to get it under 10 seconds to 100 kilometers an hour. Now, driving on a road like this, the suspension does a great job of soaking up a lot of the bumps. It's a very comfortable ride, and the wider track width also helps with that as well. I really found this car to be a very comfortable, long cruiser. The only thing I could wish for to make this any better would be radar cruise control for boring stretches of road just like this. Now, sure, the suspension is very good off-road and great at soaking up the bumps and also keeping its composure. But what I found very interesting is to see how the suspension performs on winding bits of tarmac. We're approaching a very windy section of road, and this is how this car is going to perform. We're going to go into a corner. You can hear those Cooper tires sort of make themselves known as being all-terrain tires, but they don't roar a whole bunch. There is a bit of road noise that comes from them. Obviously, they're quite big and wide and grippy tires, but then through corners, they don't squeal a whole bunch. They keep their composure, which is nice to see. And then what you get is a car that leans, but it sort of does a squat into the corner, which is a really cool feeling in a ute like this. So if you're going along in the Navara Pro-4X Warrior, yes, straight sections of road become very, wafty. You can sort of feel a bit of bounce on the front end, a bit of waft. It's not really something that feels unsettling. It just feels like, it's a looser suspension setup just to sort of soak up those bumps. But then through corners, what you feel like is all that weight transfers to the rear left tire, the front tires get lighter, and the inside tire gets very light up the front, but it never loses its composure. Going through corners is a lot of fun in this thing, and it's actually, something that you're not really supposed to have fun with in dual cab utes, but this suspension setup in here makes me feel like I'm having much more of a better time than I would be in something that might be a bit more of a basic setup. So here's a corner through here. I'm going to sort of get on it a bit more. Oh, you can feel the car's weight really shift to the right-hand side. It's very obvious where the weight goes in this thing, but again, it actually likes to lean through into the corner rather than just scrubbing off all that speed and becoming a bit of a mess through corners. This thing really just likes to go through and just eat up corners when it's on the tarmac. It's actually a lot of fun. It sort of feels very, very very faint reminiscent of some sort of trophy truck setup where those cars, you see them, they go into a hard corner and the front inside wheel lifts up. This ute is really good for driving on road despite it being mainly built for off-roading. So to do a brake test, say if we go along here, there's a yellow sign up front. I'm just going to do a bit of a quick stop, and the thing I found with this car is that the brakes are a little doughy. So they're a little bit less adequate than what I would like. So that would be my main thing on road. I would actually like some disc brakes for some more aggressive stopping power, maybe some bigger disc brakes, because at the moment I don't think it really cuts it as something that feels super confident to slam the brakes on, especially when you're trying to slow down. You feel like you have to put a bit more pressure on than you would in, say, some other utes. And so here we go, we're out on the open road and we need to punch it from 70 to 100. Ready? 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. 6 seconds to get from 70 to 100, around there. I would definitely consider a tune on this engine. Look, it's fine around town, but just at the top end between like 80 to 120, for example, this engine doesn't really pull as hard as I would like. So look, When Premcar said they were considering getting a tune done on this car, I sort of don't blame them, because it sort of needs one a little, just to sort of suit the looks a little bit better. But it doesn't necessarily feel awful without one. It's actually quite capable, but it just means that you are going to be deeper in that accelerator pedal if you want to get going a little bit more instantly. Overtakes aren't really an issue because that torque climbs through the speed, but you're just not going to get that rapid acceleration if that's something that you're looking for. So that's 945 kilometers spent in the driver's seat of the 2022 Nissan Navara Pro-4X WARRIOR. And there's no denying this thing is an absolute beast. It's great off-road and it's excellent on-road. But the question remains, should you buy one of these for the asking price of just under $70,000? And what I say to that is, I would say go into buy, but it's also part of the consider list. I would say buy this thing because it's going to be a time savings event if you want to have a ute that's tricked up to the max straight from the get-go, rather than having to shop for aftermarket parts and all that sort of stuff. It's all ready to go, thrown in this car, and that's part of the appeal. Also, all this stuff is warranted in with the car's warranty, so if anything goes wrong and it's attached to the car and the car gets damaged, for example, that's all warranted, so that's part of the appeal as well. And it's all been engineered as one unit with everything being designed together rather than bits and pieces being thrown on at random. So that's the appeal. That's when I would say buy it if that's something you want. But if you want a bit more power, or these are some of the upgrades you don't really want, then I wouldn't say this would be the ute that you absolutely want to run out and get. You could save your money and get the Pro-4X and then do your own upgrades. The main things that are really important to this car is really the lift and the suspension upgrade, and also the track width widening as well. Those things are sort of harder to get right and do legally. So at least it's done here, properly engineered on this car, and that's part of the reason why I'd say buy it for that reason. But also, if you want a bit more power, and if I had bought this car, I think I'd be tuning it in a couple of months' time just to get a bit more out of that twin turbocharged motor. But in saying that, this thing is a brilliant ute, and I think you could just definitely go out and buy one and absolutely enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe and, you know, keep updated with stuff happening on the channel. My name's Cameron. This is Product Review Cars. I'll see you in the next one.